The cargo hauler Meridian moved slowly through the asteroid belt, its engines humming softly in the darkness of space. Captain Laura Bennett sat in her chair on the bridge, watching the scanner screens with tired eyes. She had been running supplies between Mars and the outer colonies for 3 years now, and the route had become almost boring. Almost. Her pilot, Danny Price, sat at the controls with his feet propped up on the console. He was young, maybe 25, with messy brown hair and a constant smirk on his face. Kate Morris, the ship's engineer, stood behind them both, holding a cup of coffee and staring at the maintenance reports on her tablet. Kate was older than Danny, somewhere in her 30s, with short black hair and grease stains on her coveralls that never quite washed out. The three of them had been working together for 2 years, and they knew each other well enough to work in comfortable silence. That silence broke when the scanner beeped urgently. Laura sat up straight. "What is that?" Danny's feet came off the console. He leaned forward, his fingers moving across the controls. "Distress signal." "Coming from Vesta colony." Kate moved closer, looking over his shoulder. "Vesta? That's the mining colony, right? About 500 people live there." Laura nodded. "Change course. Let's see what's going on." The Meridian turned toward the dwarf planet, its engines pushing harder now. The distress signal grew stronger as they approached, but there was something wrong about it. The signal was automated, looping the same message over and over. No one was responding to their calls. When they arrived at Vesta, the colony looked dark. The lights that should have been visible from space were off. The docking bay doors hung open, and there was no traffic coming or going. Laura felt a cold weight in her stomach. "This doesn't look good," Danny said quietly. Laura stood up. "Kate, Danny, suit up. We're going to check it out." They put on their spacesuits in the airlock, checking seals and oxygen levels. Laura grabbed a plasma pistol from the weapons locker and clipped it to her belt. Danny took a cutting torch and Kate brought her toolkit. None of them said what they were all thinking. The colony was too quiet. The Meridian docked at the main entrance, and the three of them floated through the airlock into the colony. The air inside was thin and cold. Emergency lights flickered weakly in the corridors. Laura turned on her helmet light and moved forward, her boots clicking against the metal floor with magnetic steps. The main hub was a disaster. Control panels were smashed. Papers and equipment floated in the zero gravity, drifting like ghosts. Scorch marks covered the walls, the black streaks telling stories of weapons fire. But there were no bodies, no blood. No signs of where the colonists had gone. "What happened here?" Kate whispered. Laura shook her head. "I don't know. Keep looking." They moved deeper into the colony, checking rooms one by one. The living quarters were empty. The cafeteria was abandoned, with food still floating near the tables. The medical bay had been torn apart, supplies scattered everywhere. It was like everyone had simply vanished. Danny called out from down the corridor. "Hey, you need to see this." Laura and Kate hurried to where he stood in front of a storage bay. Inside, the room was filled with equipment crates, but one wall had something unusual. A weapon rack stood against the metal, and mounted on it were 6 crossbows. Kate stared at them. "Are those what I think they are?" Laura moved closer, examining the weapons. They were definitely crossbows, but modified. The limbs were reinforced with some kind of polymer material. The stocks had counterweights built into them, and there were strange gyroscopic mechanisms near the grips. Next to the rack was a container full of bolts, but these weren't ordinary arrows. They were crystalline, almost glowing with a faint blue light. Danny laughed, but it sounded nervous. "Crossbows in space? That's ridiculous. You can't use a crossbow in zero gravity. The recoil would send you spinning." Kate picked up one of the bolts, turning it over in her gloved hands. "These aren't normal. Look at this crystalline structure, and there's some kind of energy signature." Laura took one of the crossbows off the rack. It was heavier than she expected, solid and well-made. She was about to say something when her helmet radio crackled with static. A voice came through, deep and harsh. "Human vessel, you are in violation of our claim. Surrender or be destroyed." Laura's blood went cold. She recognized that voice. Not personally, but she knew what it meant. The Vryn had found them. The Vryn were a mercenary species that had been raiding human outposts for months. They were tall, over 7 feet, with forearms and armor that looked like it was grown rather than built. They considered humans weak and cowardly, only good for capturing and selling to slavers. Human military ships had fought them before, but the Vryn were fast and brutal. "Back to the ship," Laura said quickly. "Now." They ran through the corridors, but it was already too late. As they reached the airlock, they saw movement in the shadows. Armored figures emerged from the darkness, 4 of them, their helmets glowing with bioluminescent markings. The Vryn had been waiting. Danny raised his cutting torch, but Laura grabbed his arm. "Don't, we can't fight them here." The Vryn moved closer, weapons raised. Laura could see their plasma rifles charging, the barrels glowing red. She made a decision in a split second. She grabbed the crossbow she had been carrying and a quiver of the crystalline bolts. "Run!" she shouted. They scrambled through the airlock and slammed it shut behind them. The Vryn fired and the door shook from the impact. Laura, Danny, and Kate sprinted back to the Meridian, diving through the airlock just as plasma bolts hit the hull behind them. "Go, go, go," Laura yelled. Danny threw himself into the pilot seat and fired the engines. The Meridian pulled away from the docking port, metal screeching as the clamps released. Through the viewport, Laura could see Vryn ships moving into position around them, 3 vessels, all larger and better armed than the Meridian. Kate was already at the engineering console, her fingers flying across the controls. "They're jamming our communications. And our weapon systems are offline. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse." Laura cursed under her breath. The Vryn had planned this perfectly. They had herded the Meridian here like prey into a trap. The cargo haulers' shields were barely military grade, and without weapons they had no way to fight back. "We need to hide," Laura said. "Danny, head for that asteroid cluster. Maybe we can lose them in there." The Meridian's engines strained as Danny pushed them to maximum. The ship dove toward a dense field of tumbling rocks, each one big enough to crush them if they hit wrong. Behind them, the Vryn ships followed, their weapons charging. Laura looked down at the crossbow in her hands. It seemed absurd, a primitive weapon from Earth's history thousands of years old. Danny was right. Crossbows didn't work in zero gravity. The physics made it impossible. When you fired a projectile, you created an equal and opposite reaction. Without something to brace against, you would go flying backward. But someone had modified this crossbow. Someone had thought it could work. And right now, with their weapons offline and 3 Vryn ships hunting them, it was the only weapon they had. Kate noticed Laura staring at the crossbow. "Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Laura looked up. "Maybe. Can you analyze this thing? Figure out how it works?" Kate took the crossbow and one of the crystalline bolts. "I'll try." "But Laura, even if it works, what are you planning to do? Fight the Vryn with a crossbow?" Laura didn't answer. She was looking at the scanner screen, watching the Vryn ships closing in. They were being pushed deeper into the asteroid belt, farther from any help. The Meridian's engines were damaged from the escape, and it was only a matter of time before the Vryn caught them. An alarm blared on the console. Danny swore. "Hull breach on the lower deck." "Small one, but we're losing air." Kate grabbed her toolkit. "I'll patch it. Keep us flying." As Kate disappeared down the ladder, Laura sat in the captain's chair and thought. The Vryn thought humans were weak. They thought humans could only fight with technology, with computers and drones and smart weapons. They had no respect for human combat skills or ingenuity. Maybe it was time to change their minds. The Meridian shuddered as a plasma bolt grazed the shields. Danny's knuckles were white on the controls. "We can't keep running like this. The shields won't hold much longer." Laura stood up, holding the crossbow. "Then we don't run. We fight." Danny turned in his seat, staring at her. "Fight with what? That crossbow?" Laura smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You said crossbows don't work in zero gravity. Let's prove physics wrong." The Meridian limped through the asteroid field like a wounded animal trying to find shelter. Danny guided the ship between massive rocks that tumbled through space, each one capable of crushing them if his timing was off by even a second. Behind them, the 3 Vryn ships followed at a distance, patient and predatory. They knew their prey was damaged and had nowhere to go. Kate worked frantically in the engine room, welding patches over the hull breach while trying to keep the power systems online. Sparks flew from damaged circuits, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air even through her helmet. She could hear Laura and Danny talking on the radio, their voices tense. "We need to hide long enough to make repairs," Laura was saying. "Find us a big rock, something with caves or craters we can tuck into." Danny's voice came back strained. "Looking, but the Vryn are scanning everything. If we stop moving, they'll find us in minutes." Kate finished welding a plate over the breach and tested the seal. It would hold, at least for now. She climbed back up to the bridge, pulling off her helmet. Her face was covered in sweat, and her hands were shaking from adrenaline. Laura was still holding the crossbow, turning it over in her hands like it might reveal its secrets through touch alone. The crystalline bolts lay on the console beside her, glowing faintly in the dim light of the bridge. "Any luck with those repairs?" Laura asked without looking up. Kate nodded. "Hull breach is patched, but the engines are running at 60%, and I can't fix the weapons or communication systems until we have time to do a full diagnostic. That electromagnetic pulse the Vryn hit us with fried half our circuits." Danny pointed at the scanner. "Found something. Big asteroid, maybe 2 kilometers across. It's got some kind of crater system on the surface. We might be able to hide in there for a few hours." Laura made the decision quickly. "Do it." The Meridian changed course, diving toward the massive rock. Danny brought them in low, skimming just meters above the surface before dropping into a deep crater that looked like a giant had taken a bite out of the asteroid. He killed the engines and let momentum carry them into the shadows. The ship settled against the crater wall, held in place by magnetic clamps. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then Kate saw the scanner screen and her stomach dropped. "They're coming." 3 ships spreading out to search the area. Laura stood up. "Kate, I need you to look at this crossbow. Figure out how it works. Danny, keep monitoring those Vryn ships. If they find us, we'll need to move fast." Kate took the crossbow and carried it to her workstation. She set up her scanning equipment and began running tests on the weapon and the bolts. The others gave her space, knowing she worked best when she could focus. The crossbow was fascinating. The frame was made of a carbon fiber composite, light but incredibly strong. The limbs used a compound pulley system that multiplied the force of the draw. But the really interesting parts were the modifications. The stock had gyroscopic stabilizers built into it, tiny wheels that spun at high speeds. There were also counterweights that shifted automatically based on the weapon's orientation. Kate picked up one of the crystalline bolts and placed it under her microscope. The structure was unlike anything she had seen before. The bolt wasn't solid. Inside the crystalline shell was a compressed gas chamber, and at the tip was a tiny thruster nozzle. She ran a spectral analysis and whistled softly. "Laura, you need to see this." Laura came over, looking at the readouts on Kate's screen. "What am I looking at?" Kate pointed to the bolt on the screen. "This isn't just an arrow. It's a micropropulsion unit. When you fire the crossbow, the bolt launches like normal. But the moment it leaves the weapon, these tiny thrusters activate. They generate a directional thrust that compensates for the shooter's recoil." Laura leaned closer. "In zero gravity, when you fire a gun, the recoil pushes you backward. But if the projectile pushes back against that recoil—" "Exactly," Kate said excitedly. "The bolt creates a counterthrust that cancels out most of the recoil force. The gyroscopic stabilizers in the stock handle the rest, keeping the weapon steady. And look at this," she pulled up another scan. "The crystalline material isn't just decorative. When the bolt impacts something, the compressed gas is released. It creates both kinetic damage and an explosive effect." Danny had been listening from the pilot seat. He turned around, his expression skeptical. "Okay, so someone made a fancy crossbow that works in space. Who would do that? And why?" Kate zoomed in on a marking on the crossbow's frame. It was small, etched into the metal near the trigger, a circular symbol with geometric patterns inside. "This is a manufacturer's mark. I've seen it before in some old research papers. It belongs to a group called the Collective. They were a human research organization that disappeared about 10 years ago." Laura frowned. "I've heard rumors about them. They were working on something controversial, right?" Kate nodded. "They believed humanity was too dependent on high technology. They thought that in a war against advanced alien species, our reliance on computers and electronic weapons made us vulnerable. So they started developing low-tech solutions, weapons that didn't need power sources or computer targeting, weapons that would work even if all your systems were jammed or disabled." Danny laughed, but it was a bitter sound, and everyone thought they were crazy. "The military shut them down, didn't they?" "They did," Kate confirmed. "Said the Collective was wasting resources on primitive weapons when humanity needed to focus on advancing our technology." The group disbanded and their research was sealed. I guess some of their prototypes ended up in places like Vesta Colony. Laura was quiet for a moment, thinking. The Vryn had disabled the Meridian's weapons with an electromagnetic pulse. Without that pulse, they might have been able to fight back or at least run faster. The Vryn were smart. They knew how to exploit human weaknesses, but a crossbow didn't need electronics. It didn't need a power source. It was just physics and engineering, simple and reliable. The scanner beeped urgently. Danny's face went pale. They found us. All 3 ships are converging on our position. Kate looked at Laura. What do we do? Laura picked up the crossbow and slung the quiver of bolts over her shoulder. Her jaw was set and her eyes had that look Danny recognized. It was the look she got when she had made a decision that couldn't be changed. I'm going out there, Laura said. Danny stood up so fast his chair fell over. What, that's suicide? Laura, those are Vryn warships. They have plasma cannons and armor and probably 50 soldiers each. Laura checked the seals on her spacesuit. They do. But they also think humans are weak. They think we can only fight with our technology. I'm going to prove them wrong. Kate grabbed Laura's arm. How, by shooting at them with a crossbow? Laura looked at her friend. No. By boarding their command ship and taking it down from the inside. If I can disable their lead vessel, the other 2 might retreat. At the very least, it'll give you time to repair the engines and get out of here. Danny shook his head. This is crazy. Even if that crossbow works, you're 1 person against an entire ship full of Vryn warriors. Laura smiled grimly. Then they'll underestimate me. That's my advantage. She moved to the airlock, then paused and looked back.
Kate, how long do you need to get the engines back to full power?
Kate thought quickly. 2 hours if nothing else breaks. 3 to be safe, Laura nodded. I'll buy you 3 hours. Danny, once the engines are ready, you get this ship out of here. Head back to Mars and tell them what happened. Tell them about the crossbow and the collective's research. Someone needs to know. Danny's voice cracked. Laura, don't do this. We'll find another way. But Laura was already in the airlock sealing her helmet. Through the window, they could see her checking her suit systems one last time. She gave them a wave and then the outer door opened. She pushed off gently, floating out into the darkness of space. Kate and Danny watched her drift away, a tiny figure in a white spacesuit with a crossbow strapped to her back. Above them, the 3 Vryn ships hung in space like dark predators. The largest one, the command vessel, was in the center. It was a brutal-looking ship, all sharp angles and weapon ports. Danny sat down heavily. She's going to get herself killed. Kate put a hand on his shoulder. Maybe. But if anyone can pull this off, it's Laura. She's the most stubborn person I've ever met. She moved to her engineering console. Come on, we've got work to do. If Laura's buying us time, we'd better not waste it. Danny wiped his eyes and turned back to his controls. Through the viewport, they could barely see Laura anymore. She was just a small dot of light moving toward the Vryn command ship, alone in the vast darkness of space. On her private radio channel, Laura checked her oxygen levels. 3 hours of air, maybe 4 if she was careful. The crossbow was mag-locked to her back, and the quiver of crystalline bolts floated beside her, tethered to her suit. She used small bursts from her suit thrusters to adjust her trajectory, aiming for a docking port on the underside of the Vryn command ship. The ship was called the Talon's Edge. She had seen the name on her scanner before leaving the Meridian. It was fitting. The ship looked like a talon, curved and sharp and deadly. As she got closer, Laura thought about what Kate had said. The collective had tried to prepare humanity for a war against species that could disable. The inside of the Talon's Edge was nothing like a human ship. The corridors were wider, built for creatures with 4 arms and bodies over 7 feet tall. The walls were organic-looking, almost like the inside of a living creature with veins of bioluminescent material running through them. The air was thin and cold, burning Laura's lungs with each breath. Her suit compensated, filtering and warming the air, but she could still feel the wrongness of this place. Laura moved quietly, her magnetic boots making soft clicks against the metal floor. The crossbow felt heavy in her hands, real and solid in a way that plasma weapons never did. She could feel the tension in the string, the weight of the bolt loaded and ready. There was something primal about holding a weapon like this, something that connected her to thousands of years of human hunters. The corridor branched ahead. Laura paused, listening. She could hear sounds deeper in the ship. Harsh voices speaking in the Vryn language, a series of clicks and growls that her translator couldn't quite parse. Machinery humming. The ship was alive with activity. She chose the left corridor, following it toward what her mental map suggested was the cargo bay area. If she was lucky, she could find something useful there. Explosives, maybe, or access to critical systems. If she was unlucky, she would find Vryn soldiers. She found a soldier. The Vryn was standing near a cargo bay entrance, its back to her. It was massive, even bigger than Laura had expected. The armor it wore looked like it had been grown onto its body, dark blue and segmented like an insect's shell. 4 arms hung at its sides, 2 holding weapons and 2 empty. Bioluminescent markings glowed on its helmet, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Laura pressed herself against the wall, thinking fast. She could try to sneak past, but the corridor was too narrow. She could try to go back and find another route, but that would waste time. Or she could do what she came here to do. She stepped out into the open and raised the crossbow. The Vryn heard her and spun around with shocking speed. Its helmet tilted, and Laura imagined it was surprised to see a human here. The Vryn's lower arms reached for the plasma rifle strapped to its side, but Laura was already pulling the trigger. The crossbow made a sharp twang sound as the string released. The crystalline bolt flew across the space between them, faster than Laura had expected. It hit the Vryn square in the chest, right where the armor plates met. The effect was immediate and devastating. The bolt punched through the armor with a crackling burst of energy, the crystalline material shattering on impact and releasing the compressed gas inside. The Vryn staggered backward, sparks flying from the wound. Its bio-armor flickered and died, the bioluminescent markings going dark. Laura felt the recoil push against her shoulder, but the gyroscopic stabilizers in the crossbow's stock absorbed most of it. The bolt's counter-thrust, just as Kate had predicted, kept her from spinning out of control. She stayed on her feet, already reaching for another bolt. The Vryn collapsed, its 4 arms twitching. Black fluid leaked from the hole in its chest, freezing in the cold air. Laura stepped closer, keeping the crossbow aimed at its head, but the soldier was already dead. She pulled the crystalline bolt from the Vryn's armor. It was intact, reusable just as Kate had thought. The tip was stained with black blood, but the crystal structure was undamaged. Laura wiped it clean and loaded it back into the quiver. A voice echoed through the corridor, harsh and angry. More Vryn were coming. Laura ran to the cargo bay entrance and slipped inside, sealing the door behind her. She looked around quickly, taking in her surroundings. The cargo bay was huge, filled with containers and equipment. Some of it looked like stolen human technology. Laura saw medical supplies marked with Earth colony designations, mining equipment, even personal belongings. The Vryn had been raiding human settlements for months, and this was where the plunder ended up. But that wasn't what caught her attention. Near the far wall was a console displaying what looked like a ship schematic. Laura moved closer, studying the display. She couldn't read the Vryn language, but the layout was clear enough. She found the power core, the engine systems, and what she guessed was the bridge. A sound made her turn. The door was opening. 3 Vryn soldiers pushed through, their weapons raised. They saw Laura and roared, a sound that made her bones vibrate. Laura dove behind a cargo container as plasma bolts scorched the air where she had been standing. She came up on one knee, the crossbow already aimed. She fired at the closest Vryn, hitting it in the neck just above its armor. The bolt released its payload and the Vryn's head snapped back. It fell, crashing into the soldier behind it. The other 2 spread out, trying to flank her. Laura moved quickly, using the cargo containers as cover. She loaded another bolt and fired around the edge of a container, catching one Vryn in the shoulder. The soldier roared in pain but kept coming, raising its weapon with its other 3 arms. Laura rolled to the side as plasma fire melted the container where she had been. She came up behind a different container, her mind racing. The crossbow was effective, but she couldn't reload fast enough to handle multiple targets. She needed a different approach. She grabbed a piece of metal debris from the floor and threw it hard to her left. The Vryn turned toward the sound, and Laura took the opportunity to run right, heading for a stack of larger containers near the wall. She climbed up, getting higher ground. From above, she had a better view of the cargo bay. The wounded Vryn was searching below, its weapon sweeping back and forth. Laura aimed carefully and fired. The bolt hit the top of the Vryn's head, and the soldier dropped instantly, 3 down. But she could hear more coming. The whole ship knew she was here now. Laura spotted a ventilation shaft in the ceiling. It was small, probably too small for a Vryn, but just right for a human. She climbed up, pried open the grate, and pulled herself inside. Behind her, she heard Vryn soldiers entering the cargo bay, their voices angry and confused. The ventilation shaft was cramped and dark, but it led deeper into the ship. Laura crawled forward, following the path that she hoped would take her toward the bridge. Her arms ached, and her oxygen levels were dropping faster than she liked. She had been inside the Talon's edge for maybe 20 minutes, and already she was exhausted. But she kept moving because she had to. Danny and Kate were counting on her. The Meridian needed time, and somewhere on this ship was the commander who had ordered the attack on Vesta Colony, who had killed or captured hundreds of human colonists. The shaft opened into another corridor, this one narrower and more heavily guarded. Laura could see Vryn soldiers moving in formation, responding to alarms. She waited until they passed, then dropped down quietly behind them. She was deeper in the ship now. The walls here had more of those bioluminescent veins, and they pulsed faster, like the ship itself was agitated. Laura followed the veins, reasoning that they probably led to important areas. She found a room that looked like a command center. Displays covered the walls, showing views of the asteroid field and the Meridian hiding in its crater. Other screens showed the interior of the ship, soldiers running through corridors searching for the intruder. Laura approached the main console and studied it. She couldn't read the language, but she understood the graphics. The ship's power core was 3 levels down, heavily protected. The bridge was 2 levels up, probably equally well guarded. She could try for either one. A sound behind her made Laura spin around. A Vryn officer stood in the doorway, taller than the soldiers and wearing more elaborate armor. It held a plasma pistol in one hand and a wicked-looking blade in another. Its helmet retracted, revealing a face that was disturbingly humanoid in some ways and completely alien in others. Multiple eyes, a lipless mouth full of sharp teeth. The officer spoke in broken human language. "You are the human from the mining colony. The one who took our weapons." Laura raised the crossbow. "Your weapons? You stole them from dead colonists." The officer made a sound that might have been laughter. "We took them from weak creatures who could not defend themselves. That is the way of strength. The strong take from the weak." It gestured with the blade. "You are weak. Your species is weak. You hide behind your machines because you have no true warrior spirit." Laura's finger tightened on the trigger. "Is that what you think?" The officer tilted its head. "That is what I know. Your people run when we come. They beg for mercy. They cry and plead like children. You are no different." Laura smiled coldly. "Want to bet?" She fired. The bolt streaked across the room faster than the officer could react. But at the last second, the Vryn moved with shocking speed, bringing up its blade. The bolt hit the blade and deflected, shattering against the wall in a burst of light and energy. The officer laughed. "You see? Primitive weapons for primitive minds." Laura was already loading another bolt. That was a warning shot. This time she aimed lower at the officer's legs. The Vryn tried to dodge, but Laura had anticipated the movement. The bolt caught it in the knee and the joint exploded in a spray of black blood and sparks. The officer fell, roaring in pain and anger. Laura moved forward, loading another bolt, but the officer was faster than she expected. Even wounded, it lashed out with its blade, forcing Laura to jump back. The blade cut through the air where her throat had been. Laura ran through the corridors of the Talon's edge with soldiers chasing behind her. The plasma pistol she had taken from the officer was hot in her hand, and the damaged crossbow bounced against her back. Her ribs screamed with every breath, and she was pretty sure at least 2 were broken, but she kept running because stopping meant dying. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a group of 3 Vryn soldiers. They raised their weapons, but Laura was faster. She fired the plasma pistol twice, dropping one soldier and wounding another. The third lunged at her with its forearms outstretched, trying to grab her. Laura ducked under the grab and brought the crossbow around. At point-blank range, she fired directly into the soldier's chest. The bolt punched through the armor, and the Vryn was thrown backward by the explosive force. Laura didn't wait to see if it was dead. She grabbed the wounded soldier's weapon and kept running. The access card she had taken from the officer was her key to deeper parts of the ship. She used it at a security door, and it opened immediately. Beyond was a lift that would take her up toward the bridge. Laura stepped inside and activated it, watching through the transparent walls as the levels passed by. The ship was in chaos. Soldiers ran through every corridor searching for her. Alarms blared continuously. On one level, she saw what looked like technicians trying to seal off sections of the ship. They thought she was trying to sabotage systems or plant explosives. They didn't understand that she only had one target. The lift stopped at the bridge level. The doors opened, and Laura found herself facing 4 guards standing in formation. They didn't hesitate. Plasma fire filled the lift, and Laura threw herself to the floor. She rolled out, firing the plasma pistol as she moved. 2 guards fell before her weapon overheated and died. The other 2 charged her. Laura dropped the useless pistol and swung the crossbow off her back. She fired, catching one guard in the face. The bolt's crystalline structure shattered against the helmet, and the guard's head snapped back with such force that its neck broke. The last guard slammed into Laura and they both went down. The Vrin was on top of her, using its weight advantage. Two hands grabbed her throat while the other two tried to pin her arms. Laura's vision started to go dark. She couldn't breathe. Her broken ribs felt like they were stabbing into her lungs. She still had her knife. With the last of her strength, Laura drove it up into the gap under the guard's arm where the armor plates met. The Vrin roared and loosened its grip. Laura twisted the knife and pushed, rolling the much larger creature off her. She stood up, gasping, her whole body shaking. The crossbow was broken now. The string snapped during the fight. She threw it aside and picked up one of the fallen guard's plasma rifles. It was heavy and awkward in her hands, designed for someone with 4 arms, but it would have to do. The bridge door was ahead, sealed and heavily armored. Laura used the officer's access card and the door slowly began to open. She could hear voices inside, harsh and commanding. One voice stood out above the others, deep and resonant with authority. That would be the commander. Laura checked her oxygen levels. She had been inside the ship for almost an hour now. Her suit was running low and her body was reaching its limits. But she was so close. Just a few more minutes. The door finished opening and Laura stepped onto the bridge of the Talon's edge. The bridge was huge, more like an amphitheater than a control room. The ceiling arched high above, covered in those bioluminescent veins that pulsed like a heartbeat. Stations were arranged in a circle around a central platform where the commander stood. Commander Krell was enormous, easily 8 feet tall, with armor that looked like it had been forged from black metal and grown into his body over decades. His 4 arms each held a weapon or control device. His face was visible through his open helmet, scarred and ancient, with eyes that glowed with a cold intelligence. Around him stood 6 elite guards, each one larger and better armed than any soldier Laura had faced so far. They turned as one when Laura entered, weapons rising. Krell raised one hand and the guards held their fire. He looked at Laura with something that might have been curiosity or amusement. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly clear in human language. "You are the human who has been killing my soldiers." Laura kept the plasma rifle aimed at him. "I am." Krell tilted his head. "You fight well for your species. I have killed many humans in my time. They usually beg or try to bargain. You do neither." Laura took a step forward. "I'm here to stop you. No bargaining necessary." Krell made a sound like laughter.
Stop me? One human with stolen weapons thinks she can stop me?
He gestured around the bridge. "I have conquered 17 worlds. I have destroyed fleets. I have fought creatures far more dangerous than you can imagine. And you think that you, with your primitive tools and broken body, can stop me?" Laura smiled, and there was blood on her teeth. Yes, she fired the plasma rifle. But Krell moved faster than should have been possible for something his size. He was off the platform before the shot reached him, and his guards were already returning fire. Laura dove behind a control station as plasma bolts scorched the air around her. She came up firing, hitting one guard in the chest. The guard's armor absorbed most of the blast, but it staggered backward. Laura kept firing, forcing the guards to take cover. But her rifle was overheating, the barrel glowing red from continuous use. Krell appeared beside her, moving with terrifying speed. He grabbed the rifle with 2 hands and crushed it, the metal crumpling like paper. His other 2 hands drew plasma blades that hummed with lethal energy. "Enough games," Krell said. "Face me properly or die like a coward." Laura drew her knife. It looked pathetic compared to Krell's blades, a tiny piece of metal against weapons that could cut through steel. But it was all she had left. Krell attacked and Laura barely dodged. His 4 arms moved independently, each blade coming from a different angle. Laura blocked one blade with her knife, ducked under another, and rolled away from the third. The 4th blade caught her shoulder, cutting through her suit and into flesh. Pain exploded through Laura's arm, but she used the momentum of the roll to come up behind a console. Krell followed, relentless and patient. He was toying with her now, she realized. He could have killed her already, but he wanted to make a point. He wanted to prove that humans were weak. Laura looked around desperately. The guards were moving into position surrounding her. Her oxygen was at 15%. Her body was failing. She had maybe minutes left, if that. On a console nearby, she saw a display showing the ship's systems, the power distribution grid, the weapon arrays, the life support, and there, highlighted in what she assumed was the Vrin color for danger, was the power core status. It was running at maximum capacity, feeding energy to all the weapons and systems. An idea formed in Laura's mind. It was insane. It would probably kill her. But it might work. She threw her knife at Krell. It wasn't meant to hit him, just to distract him for a second. While he batted it aside, Laura lunged for the console and started pressing controls at random. She didn't know what most of them did, but she found one that looked like it might control power distribution. She rerouted everything. All the power from weapons, all the power from non-essential systems, everything into the engines. The ship shuddered as the sudden overload hit the propulsion systems. Krell realized what she was doing and roared. He charged at her, blades raised, but the bridge was already tilting as the ship's thrust went wildly out of balance. Gravity shifted and everyone stumbled. Laura grabbed onto the console with one hand and used her other hand to keep pressing controls. She found what she was looking for. The emergency vent for the power core. It was meant to release excess energy in controlled bursts, but if she disabled the safety protocols, she disabled them. Deep in the ship, the power core began to overload. Alarms shrieked. The bioluminescent veins in the walls pulsed frantically, going from blue to red to white. The ship bucked and twisted as explosions rippled through the lower decks. Krell grabbed Laura and lifted her off the ground with two arms, while his other two prepared to run her through with his blades. "Foolish human, you have doomed yourself along with us." Laura grabbed his wrists, looking into his glowing eyes. "I know, but at least I'm taking you with me." Then she did something that Krell didn't expect. She headbutted him hard, right in the face. Her helmet cracked and Krell's nose shattered. He dropped her in surprise. Laura hit the floor and rolled. She saw an emergency escape pod near the edge of the bridge. It was designed for Vryn, way too big for her, but it would work. She ran for it as the ship began tearing itself apart. Krell recovered quickly. He chased her, bleeding black blood from his broken nose, his face twisted with rage. But the explosions were getting closer. A support beam fell from the ceiling, blocking his path. He roared in frustration, watching Laura reach the escape pod. Laura looked back at him one last time. "They said crossbows don't work in zero gravity. I proved them wrong. Maybe it's time you learned that humans are stronger than you think." She sealed herself in the pod and launched it. The small craft shot away from the Talon's edge just as the power core went critical. The explosion lit up the asteroid field like a small sun, tearing the command ship apart from the inside out. Laura woke up 3 days later in the medical bay of a human outpost called Ceres Station. Her body was wrapped in medical gel, and dozens of small machines were working to repair her injuries. 2 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, severe bruising, oxygen deprivation damage to her brain, and a deep cut on her shoulder that had required 30 stitches. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive. Kate sat beside her bed reading something on a tablet. When she saw Laura's eyes open, she jumped up with a huge smile. "You're awake finally, Danny, get in here." Danny rushed in from the hallway carrying 2 cups of coffee. He nearly dropped them when he saw Laura looking at him. "Thank God, we thought you might not wake up." Laura's voice came out as a croak. "How long?" Kate held up a cup of water with a straw. 3 days. We got you to Ceres as fast as the Meridian could fly. The doctors put you in medical stasis to heal." She paused. "Laura, you need to know something." The story got out. "Everyone knows what you did." Laura tried to sit up, but her body protested. "What story?" Danny pulled up a chair. "The Vryn transmitted everything. The fight on their ship, Krell's death, the destruction of the Talon's Edge. It was on their military channels, but human intelligence intercepted it. And then someone leaked it to the public networks." Kate activated a screen on the wall. News feeds scrolled past, all showing the same story. Captain Laura Bennett of the cargo hauler Meridian had single-handedly boarded a Vryn warship and killed its commander. She had used a crossbow, of all things, and survived against impossible odds. "They're calling you the Hunter," Kate said quietly. "That's what the Vryn named you in their transmissions." "The human who hunts in the dark," Laura stared at the screen. There were images of her, pulled from public records. The Meridian's registration photo. Old pictures from her cargo routes. Someone had even found a video of her from years ago, competing in some kind of zero-gravity sports championship. But what really caught her attention were the comments from other ship captains and colonists. They were calling her a hero. People who had lost family and friends to Vryn raids were saying that Laura had given them hope. She had shown that humans could fight back. Danny cleared his throat. It gets weirder. The Vryn sent another message 2 days ago. It was addressed specifically to you. He played an audio file. The voice was harsh and clicking, translated by computer into human language. Hunter of humans, you have proven your worth in combat. You have claimed victory over Commander Krell. Warrior of the third bloodline, by the laws of our people we acknowledge your strength. The raiding fleets will withdraw from your territory. We will not hunt prey that hunts us in return. Laura let that sink in. They're retreating. All of them? Kate nodded. Not just retreating. They're afraid of you. Or at least they respect you. In Vryn culture, a warrior who defeats a commander in single combat is considered touched by their war gods. They think you're some kind of chosen fighter. Laura laughed, and it hurt her ribs. That's ridiculous. I got lucky. If that power core hadn't overloaded when it did, Krell would have killed me. Danny shook his head. That's not how they see it. And honestly, that's not how anyone sees it. Laura, you boarded an enemy warship alone with a weapon that everyone said wouldn't work, and you won. That's not luck. That's courage and skill. Over the next few days, as Laura healed, more news reached her. Military engineers were studying the crossbow technology. Kate had turned over all her research, and teams were working to replicate the crystalline bolts and the gyroscopic stabilizers. The design was simple enough to mass produce, and the effectiveness against Vryn bioarmor made them invaluable. But it went beyond just the military. Civilian ships were requesting crossbows for self-defense. Colonists on frontier worlds wanted them. The weapon that everyone had dismissed as primitive was suddenly in high demand. A man from the Human Defense Council visited Laura in her hospital room. His name was Gregory Lane, and he wore an expensive suit that looked out of place on a space station. He sat down beside her bed and smiled like they were old friends. Captain Bennett, it's an honor to meet you. I wanted to personally thank you for what you've done. You've given humanity a significant advantage in our dealings with the Vryn. Laura didn't trust the smile. I didn't do it for humanity. I did it to save my crew, Gregory nodded. Of course. But the result is the same. The Vryn are backing off, and we have a new weapon technology that they fear. The Council would like to offer you a position. Head of Tactical Development for Low-Tech Warfare Solutions. The pay would be substantial, and you would have access to unlimited resources. Laura looked at Kate and Danny, who were standing near the door. Kate shook her head slightly. Laura turned back to Gregory. No, thank you. I'm a cargo captain. That's all I want to be. Gregory's smile faltered. Captain Bennett, you could be helping to shape humanity's defense strategy. Your experience is invaluable. Laura sat up straighter, ignoring the pain. Mr. Lane, I used that crossbow because I had to. Because the Vryn disabled all our high-tech weapons. If you want to honor what I did, then maybe you should be asking why we're so dependent on technology that can be jammed or hacked. Maybe you should be finding the researchers from the collective who designed these weapons and apologizing for shutting them down. Gregory stood up stiffly. The collective was developing unauthorized weapons. The collective was trying to keep humans alive, Laura shot back. And they were right. We need weapons that work when everything else fails. We need to stop assuming that the newest technology is always the best technology. Gregory left without another word. Kate came over and squeezed Laura's hand. That was amazing. Did you see his face? Laura smiled tiredly. Probably just made an enemy of someone important. But I don't care. I'm tired of people trying to make me into something I'm not. Over the following weeks, Laura recovered enough to leave the medical bay. The Meridian had been repaired and upgraded by the grateful station authorities. They had offered to give the ship military-grade weapons and shields, but Laura refused. She just wanted her cargo hauler back the way it was. The crossbow was gone, destroyed in the fight aboard the Talon's Edge. But before Laura left the station, Kate presented her with something wrapped in cloth. Inside was a new crossbow, custom-built by the engineers who were studying the design. It was lighter than the original, with better stabilizers and a stronger frame. They wanted you to have the first production model, Kate said. They're calling it the Hunter series. Laura ran her fingers along the smooth wood and metal. It felt right in her hands, balanced and deadly. Did they find out who made the original? Who in the collective designed it? Kate nodded. A researcher named Dr. Henry Cole. He disappeared after the collective was shut down. No one knows where he went. Laura made a mental note of that name. Someday, if she ever got the chance, she would find Dr. Cole and thank him. His weapon had saved her life and changed everything. When the Meridian finally left Ceres Station, there was a small crowd at the viewing windows watching them go. Laura stood on the bridge with Kate and Danny looking back at the station one last time. "Think they'll stop asking you for interviews now?" Danny asked. Laura laughed. "Not a chance. But we'll be in deep space for the next few months. They can't reach us out there." Kate pulled up their route on the navigation screen. Mars to Europa, picking up ice mining equipment. Then to Titan for a load of processed hydrocarbons. Simple, boring cargo runs. Just the way you like it. Laura settled into her captain's chair. "Perfect. Let's get going." But as the Meridian's engines powered up and the ship moved away from the station, Laura knew that things would never be quite simple again. She had become a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. The Hunter. The human who proved that old weapons could be just as deadly as new ones. In the asteroid belt, Vryn ships received orders to avoid human territories. The story of Captain Laura Bennett and the death of Commander Krell was told and retold among their warriors. Some saw it as a warning. Others saw it as a challenge. On frontier colonies, humans felt a little bit safer. The raids had stopped, at least for now. Children played with toy crossbows, pretending to be the hunter. Old weapons were pulled out of museums and storage, examined with new interest. And in the depths of space, on a hidden station that no maps showed, Dr. Henry Cole watched the news feeds and smiled. His weapons were finally being appreciated. His vision of a humanity that didn't rely solely on technology was becoming real. He activated a console and began working on new designs. If a simple crossbow could change everything, what else could he create? What other old ideas could be made new again? The universe was vast and full of dangers, but humanity was learning an important lesson, one that Laura Bennett had proven with blood and courage. Sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. Sometimes the old ways were worth remembering, and sometimes, when everyone said something was impossible, all it took was one person willing to pull the trigger and prove them wrong. Laura looked out at the stars streaming past and thought about everything that had happened. She had gone from a simple cargo captain to a legend in just a few days. It was strange and overwhelming, but deep down she knew one thing for certain. If the Vryn or any other... 6 months passed. The Meridian made its cargo runs through the solar system, carrying supplies and equipment to colonies and stations. Laura fell back into her routine, and slowly the attention faded. There were still occasional interview requests and messages from military officials, but Laura ignored them all. She was content to be just a cargo captain again. Kate had continued her research on the crossbow technology. She published papers that were read by engineers across human space. The Hunter series crossbows were now standard equipment on most civilian ships and frontier colonies. Danny had started training sessions teaching other pilots how to handle the weapons in zero gravity. He was surprisingly good at it, but Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. Dr. Henry Cole, the man who had designed the crossbow, was still missing. The collective's research was still mostly sealed. There were answers out there, and Laura wanted to find them. The message came on a Tuesday. It appeared on the Meridian's communication system with no sender information and no origin point. Just coordinates to a location in the outer rim, far beyond the established trade routes, and a single image. The symbol of the collective, the same mark that had been on the original crossbow. Laura stared at the screen for a long time. Kate and Danny came to look over her shoulder. "That's way out in the middle of nowhere," Danny said. "Days of travel from the nearest station. Could be a trap," Kate frowned. "Or it could be Dr. Cole. If he's been hiding all these years, this would be the kind of place he'd choose." Laura made her decision quickly. "We're going. If there's even a chance of finding him and learning more about the collective's work, we have to take it." Danny sighed. "I knew you were going to say that. Fine. But I'm bringing extra weapons this time." The journey took 5 days. They traveled through empty space past the orbit of Neptune, into the dark regions where sunlight was just a distant star among many. The coordinates led them to a rogue planet, a world without a sun, drifting alone through the void. Orbiting this dark planet was a station. It was old, probably built decades ago, with a design that predated most modern space architecture. Light still glowed in some windows, and the station's beacon was active, though broadcasting on obsolete frequencies. "Life support is active," Kate reported, reading the scans. "Someone is definitely living there." Laura suited up and prepared to board. This time, Danny and Kate insisted on coming with her. They had already argued about it for 2 hours, and Laura had finally given in. They took the shuttle across to the station and docked at an airlock that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Inside, the station was cold but functional. The corridors were narrow and lined with equipment that Laura recognized from history books. This place was ancient, probably built during the first wave of deep space exploration. They found signs of habitation quickly: living quarters with personal belongings, a kitchen with recently used dishes, a laboratory filled with tools and partially built devices. Someone had been working here alone for a very long time. In the main research lab, they found him. Dr. Henry Cole was an old man, probably in his 70s, with white hair and a beard that reached his chest. He wore simple coveralls and safety glasses, and he was working at a bench covered in weapon prototypes. He looked up when they entered, and his eyes went wide. "Captain Bennett," he said quietly, "I hoped you would find this place." Laura stepped forward. "Dr. Cole, you've been hiding here for 10 years. Henry nodded slowly. "After the council shut down the collective, I knew they would never understand. So I took what research I could and disappeared. I've been working here ever since, continuing the projects we started." He gestured around the lab. "Weapons that don't rely on power sources or computer systems. Tools that will work no matter what technology the enemy has." Kate moved to one of the workbenches, examining a compound bow with explosive arrows. "This is incredible. You've been doing all this alone?" Henry smiled sadly. "I had help at first. A few other members of the collective came with me. But over the years they left or passed away. Now it's just me and my work." Danny picked up what looked like a spring-loaded spear. "Why didn't you come forward after the Vryn attacks? After Laura proved your designs worked? The council would have welcomed you back." Henry's expression darkened. "Would they? The same people who called my work primitive and unnecessary? The same officials who said humanity's future was in advanced technology, not old weapons?" He shook his head. "No. They would have taken my research, used it, and then forgotten about the philosophy behind it. They would have missed the point entirely." Laura understood what he meant. "You weren't just designing weapons. You were trying to change how humanity thinks about survival." Henry's eyes lit up. "Exactly. We've become so dependent on our technology that we've forgotten the basics. When your computer fails, when your power runs out, when your enemy jams your systems, what do you have left? The answer should be yourselves. Your hands, your mind, your creativity." He walked to a large display on the wall. It showed dozens of weapon designs, each one simpler than modern military hardware but elegant in its function. Crossbows, slings, spears, axes, all modified for space combat and zero-gravity environments. "Every one of these can be made with basic materials," Henry explained. "No rare elements, no complex electronics. A colonist on the most remote world could build them with simple tools. That's true independence. That's true strength." Kate was looking at the designs with fascination. "But why did the council shut you down? This all seems so practical." Henry's face grew bitter. "Politics and money. The defense contractors didn't like that we were developing weapons they couldn't control or profit from. The military officials thought we were questioning their competence. And the politicians were afraid that supporting low-tech research would make humanity look weak to other species." He looked at Laura. "But you proved them all wrong. You showed that a simple crossbow in the hands of a determined person could accomplish what a warship couldn't." Laura felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what I had to do. The crossbow worked because Kate figured out how it functioned. I was just the one who pulled the trigger." Henry smiled. "That humility is exactly why you were the right person. The wrong person would have gloated, would have used the fame to gain power. But you just went back to your cargo runs." He walked to a locked cabinet and opened it with a key from around his neck. Inside were more weapons, these ones clearly more advanced than the others. "I want to show you something," Henry said. He pulled out what looked like a handheld device with a strange circular design. "This is a gravity slingshot. It uses the natural gravity wells around asteroids and planets to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. No power source, just physics and timing." Danny examined it carefully. "That's genius. How fast can it shoot?" Henry activated a demonstration on a nearby screen. "In the right conditions, fast enough to punch through capital ship armor. I've been developing these for years, but I never had a way to test them properly." Laura looked around the lab at all the incredible work Henry had done alone. "Dr. Cole, you can't stay hidden forever. This research needs to be shared. People need to know that there are alternatives to high-tech weapons. Henry sat down heavily on a stool. I'm old, Captain, and I'm tired. The world moved on without me. The collective is gone. My colleagues are dead or scattered. What difference would it make if I came forward now? Kate put a hand on his shoulder. It would make all the difference. Because of your crossbow design, hundreds of ships and colonies now have a way to defend themselves. But there's so much more you've created here. Imagine what humanity could do with all of this. Henry looked at the three of them. Laura could see the loneliness in his eyes, the years of isolation and doubt. He had sacrificed everything for his work, and he wasn't sure if it had been worth it. Laura made a decision. Come with us. Bring your research. We'll take you to the colonies, to the places where people actually use your weapons. Let them thank you in person. Let them show you how much your work matters. Henry was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and looked around his lab one last time. All right, but I have one condition. This research doesn't go to the military or the council. It goes to the people, free and open so anyone can use it. Can you promise me that? Laura held out her hand. I promise. We'll make sure your work reaches everyone who needs it. Henry shook her hand. Then I'll come. Let me gather what I need. Over the next few hours, they packed up Henry's most important research. The weapon designs, the manufacturing specifications, the theoretical papers explaining the philosophy behind the collective's work. It was a massive amount of information, a lifetime of study compressed into data drives and physical prototypes. As they prepared to leave, Henry stood at the window of his lab, looking out at the darkness. I thought I would die here alone with my work. I never imagined I would get a second chance. Laura stood beside him. You never stopped believing in what you were doing. That takes courage, Henry smiled. Not as much courage as boarding an enemy warship with just a crossbow. When I heard what you did, I knew there was hope for humanity after all. If one person could do that, imagine what we all could do if we just remembered how to rely on ourselves.